Hello, this is Dread, and in today's video topic, we're going to be going over a hot topic of discussion that the community has been going around with a lot, and that is build diversity in Last Epoch and power creep and such things like that, including, of course, the discussion around Uber Abberoth. How many builds should be able to do them? What builds should be able to do them? Should only a certain amount of builds be able to do them? Or should every build be able to do them? I don't agree with that last part. I don't think every build should do them. But still, continuing on, this is the kind of discussion that's been raging over the past few days, and I wanted to throw my chips in the ring here in my discussion. Now, I'm going to be completely honest, but I'm also going to preface this with this is my opinion, okay? This is my humble opinion as someone who's been playing for the past 4 to 5 years, but I'm also someone who has been playing for fun. I play Last Epoch for fun. I know that's crazy to say considering I've been literally playing it so much, but the way that I play Last Epoch is I try to not take it too seriously. There's a lot of individuals who take the game a little too seriously sometimes, and it kind of just ruins the fun a little bit. I try to not take the game too seriously too much. Like obviously, I'll take it enough to like care about the broad topics, but usually when it comes to the video game, I try to just enjoy it for what it is instead of trying to enjoy it for what it was, if that makes sense. So, we're going to go into this little slideshow thing I made. So, one moment here. I have prepared a chart. So, the way that this chart works is these are the amount of builds that are viable. Okay. And this is the progression of content that we currently have. So we have certain subsections of this. We have the campaign, which almost everything works in the campaign, right? Except for maybe like, I don't know, basic attack. I don't know. There's like a few things that don't work after the campaign or through the campaign. Like, I don't know, acid flask feels pretty acid flasky in the campaign. It kind of sucks. Then we have normal monoliths, which most of every single build ever can do, as long as it's like slightly competently put together. Like hell, even Firebrand could get through the campaign. And then we have empowered monos. This is when things start getting a lot more HP and things like Meteor get kicked out, at least in my humble opinion. Of course, if you overinvest into Meteor, it can do fine. But this is like where things like Meteor starts falling off. And then we have the current endgame content of Last Epoch, 1,000 corruption monoliths and Abberoth, normal Abberoth. This is where I think most of 10% to 20% of the player base is currently sitting. This is like the quote unquote tier 16 maps in Path of Exile. This is where most people are at, including me. I'm in this slot. My audience is in this slot. The people who watch me are here and here, right? These are the people who watch me, so I usually cater towards this crowd. And as long as you stay within this section, the build diversity of the game is like very good, right? But then we move on to 2K corruption and Uber Aberoth, right? I just chose Frostclaw because it's really strong still, even after the nerfs and all that. But still, that is how my chart goes. Now here is like maybe 10 to 20% of builds. Here's like 5% of builds. And then the rest, this is the rest, like the rest of the 80% of builds. Like you got your Locust Swarm Blades, your Meteor Mages, your Firebrand boys, like Disintegrate. I think Disintegrate can go a little bit higher than this, but like I'm talking about in terms of comfort, like how comfortable these skills feel. I put Fireball up there here. There is an endgame viable Fireball build, but every other variant of Fireball sucks, so I'm still putting it up here, whether or not there's only one endgame variant of Fireball, right? I think Fireball still deserves to be put up here. I know that there's a strong Fireball build. That's not what this chart is meant for. I meant the average of everything, right? Because like the average Volcanic Orb build can do this, the average Frostclaw build can do this, the average Meteor build can do this, yada yada yada, right? I just threw on some things just to give you an idea of the kind of skills that are expected to go where. Now, like I said, here is where the people who play for like a day and then quit usually sit at. At this point, this is where I would say the game is quote unquote too easy. I think the game is a little too easy here. Too much trash can work early on. You can play Cinder Strike and feel like a viable build all the way down here. Until you get here, this little black bar here, this is where Cinder Strike falls off a cliff, right? This is like where you start feeling like you're having a terrible time. Like the moment you get to like empowered monos is like when Cinder Strike falls off a cliff. And that's kind of bad that like a skill can be really good up until that point because it kind of lulls you into a false sense of security. And then you get to empowered monos and you're just like, wait, did I do something wrong? No, my friend, Cinder Strike is the wrong one here. So that's at least my problem with too easy of a campaign. I would like to see this like a little bit down, but then like more streamlined, right? More of a streamlined curve instead of this jutty curve that we currently have. This is pretty much what we have in game. Like this jutty curve that we have. It's like jut, 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 like immediately because the campaign is not very hard in Last Epoch. You are generally like when you play the game, as long as I do, when you play for 4 years, you're pretty much speed running through the game and getting done with it in like the campaign in like an hour or two, right? You're just speed running the campaign, getting through it, ignoring everything, and getting through the campaign. This is where right here, like where empowered monos start. This is where the real quote unquote game begins, at least from in my opinion. Now, is that good? Is that bad? I'm not entirely sure. I would like the onboarding process to be like easy. I don't think the onboarding process needs to be bad or hard or whatever. Like I would like new players to have an easier time in the beginning, but I also don't think they need their hands held, at least in my opinion. But this is like the content of the game that's like quote unquote easy, right? In my opinion. And this is where it starts actually getting a little bit hard. The only time that this part of the content is easy is when you look up a guide. If you don't look up a guide, if you don't like watch someone else's content and like play their build, this part of the game is where when the game gets really, really hard. Now, should this part be really, really hard versus like how easy all this is? I'm not entirely sure. I legitimately think, in my humble opinion, I think the problem, in my opinion, like they just need to like cut this out and do this. And then this should just be monolith. Like this is what they need to do, in my opinion. They need to like cut out normal monoliths, right? And then just have monoliths and then have the corruption system scale into 1,000 corruption. Have one corruption be like, like normal monoliths and then have it push into 1,000 corruption. I think this would fix a lot of the problems currently because having this and then empowered monos is what is like kind of making the new player think that they're done. Because what'll happen, a lot of people that I talk to who are new players, they don't even know that empowered monos exist. They don't even have any idea what the fuck you're talking about when you ask about empowered monos. Like they have no idea that this step exists, that you can empower your monoliths at level 100. And like, should they have to know that? Should they have to know that there's a difference between normal monoliths and empowered monoliths? Probably not. I think this part is like there's just too much of this part and not enough this part. Even with all the speeding up that they've done, even with how fast you can get, the normal casual player is not going to be speeding through normal monoliths the way that like I do, right? Or the way that like Lizard does, or the way that like Perry does. Like they're not going to be speeding through this. So they're going to be taking their time with like very low amounts of movement speed. A large problem that I noticed with a lot of the people that were saying that the game was too easy, I would look at their character and they would have like probably like 15% to 30% movement speed. They would have this much movement speed, right? They would be playing like, let's say, a Judgment Paladin, and they'd be at this much movement speed. The problem with being at this much movement speed is you're too slow and you need to go faster, in my opinion. Right now, Last Epoch unfortunately requires you to walk a lot. The strongest stat in the entire game is movement speed, and I really don't like that. And that's just because there's just a lot of walking to be had between getting through the campaign, between getting through normal monoliths, between getting empowered monoliths. Like the largest obstacle you have is the amount of distance that you have between point A and point B. Now, this isn't because like the monoliths aren't thick or anything like that. Like the problem is there's just too much. There's just too much chaff, too much hand holding. Like I think that if just normal monoliths just scaled into corruption. Like, let's say you started at 0 corruption, and then as you built it up, it would change the level of the zone, and then you'd be at like 100. Like, once you get to 100 corruption, you'd be like, to level 100 zone, or maybe something like that, right? Something like that. They could fuck around with that, right? Let's be real. Like, don't take my word as God. Like, obviously they could like change things, but the fact that this steps exists and most players at this time have not realized how important movement speed is the biggest issue I think in last epoch. Is the fact that you need way more movement speed than this, at least like double of this movement speed, to get through this portion of the game easier, right? A lot of the people who are saying the game was too easy are people who were playing Judgment Paladin or Racing Strike Void Knight, and they had like 20 to 30% movement speed, and they were trudging through the monos, and they haven't even gotten to empowered monos yet. They haven't even touched empowered monos. They haven't even gotten to this part yet. They haven't even gotten to this part yet, right? This is like where, you don't need that much movement speed, but here you need all of the movement speed because there's just too much. There's just bloody too much, in my humble opinion. At least that's my opinion anyways. So that's just my opinion on the build diversity and power creep in last epoch. Now, for Uber Abberoth and such, right, for this part, I think this is fine. I think this is how it's supposed to be. I think Uber Abberoth is a kind of a metric for EHG to take and nerf builds by. If your build is Uber Abberoth viable, it's probably going to get nerfed next patch in some way or some other. Like, you're probably abusing some kind of like lots of like you're probably abusing some kind of mechanic inside your skill tree. You're abusing some kind of defensive mechanic like overlapping healing pools. You're like abusing range while also doing infinite damage. There's like a lot of things that like can get you up into this echelon, but this is the echelon of things that will probably get nerfed eventually, and I'm completely fine with this existing. There's nothing wrong with this. I like this. I like the fact that only certain builds can do Uber Abberoth. I'm pretty sure this is my tinfoil hat theory. They literally only made Uber Abberoth to be a metric of whether or not they should nerf something, because if it can do Uber Abberoth, it probably should get nerfed in some way, right? Let's be real. And now I believe that this is going to be how they balance from now on, is by using this metric as the balance metric, because before this is all fine and dandy in my opinion. This is like where like all the good stuff is, and like this is where the fun begins in last epoch in my opinion. This is where like all the fun stuff, this is where like 20% of the builds remain where they can do all this, while this is where like only 5% remain, and a lot of it is either infinite healing cheese, snapshotting cheese, like just complete cheese. Like, this is like, to give you an idea, this part of the game is where, like, to symbolize it in one image, right? This is this part of the game. Here you go. 1 second. There you go. It's kind of too big of cheese. Shit, 1 second. I have to make the cheese smaller. Omega cheese, right? If the cheese is too big, maybe some rats will get. This is where the cheese is, right here. This is where cheese is. This is like a full course meal, like turkey, food. I didn't want to like put an actual turkey there. That'd been weird, right? Here's what this part of the game is. This is where the good stuff is. If you like turkey, if you don't like turkey, then I don't know, man. This is where, like, I don't know, Pop-Tart. I would say a Pop-Tart. You don't necessarily want to go out of your way to eat a Pop-Tart, but like, you kind of want to, like Pop-Tarts aren't terrible, right? Pop-Tarts aren't terrible. Oh, you know what? This is a cooked Pop-Tart, right? Like in like a microwave or in a toaster oven or whatever. And this is an uncooked Pop-Tart. Yeah. And then this is what would be a good word? What would be a good one? I'm trying to think here. What's a food that I don't like? Green beans. Yeah, there you go. One moment. I'm trying to like do this properly. Green beans. Oh my goodness, it's so big. That is like where this is the progression of last epoch in terms of food. Okay, in my humble opinion. Campaign, green beans. They suck, but you have to eat them. You have to eat them. Normal monoliths, they are an uncooked Pop Tart. They're edible and you can eat them and they taste fine. And this is where the game starts tasting good, but you definitely want something better. Empowered monolith, a toasted Pop Tart. It's not the most healthy thing for you, but it's definitely a tasty thing for you, right? Then you have 1,000 Corruption Abbey. This is where the meat of the game is. This is where, like, you really want to taste that turkey, right? And then we go all the way here, and then it just becomes cheese. Just a big block of cheese. All right, that's gonna be it for this video today. With all that being said, this has been Dread. I'll have to go do something else. Bye.